and welcome to our online courses at the beach in Ventura, California. And welcome to the wonderful world of alignment. I'm going to give you some of the basic foundational pieces of what whole body alignment means, and so that you have a greater understanding when you're taking the online courses. If you haven't had a chance to do a private session here in person or via Skype, which we also offer and highly recommend, that you have an understanding of the terminology that we're using and kind of the basic fundamentals of what we teach with whole body alignment. So the very first kind of overview that I want to share with you is kind of the alignment of the skeleton. This is the most underlying piece of all of this. And I like to do a demonstration with my foam rollers, which I'll do in just a second. Let me show you my fantastic stick figures first. So this is essentially what we want our skeleton to look like. We want to have a vertical skeleton. So that's why I put this up here. Vertical skeleton. What that means is that we have the ear stacked over the shoulder, stacked over the hip, stacked over the knee, stacked over the ankle bone. And I'll give you a little bit more detail of that as we go through the rest of the introductory videos that I've made available for you. Another really important piece of this is that you have to have a smile on your face at all times. And in addition to the vertical skeleton, which is important for maintaining position of the bones and length of the muscles, but also for maintaining density of the bones. We need to have all of our parts stacked on top of the pieces below them so they know how dense to be, how much everything above it weighs. In addition to that, and I'll talk really specifically about this, but I wanted to show you a visual of it, we want to make sure that we have vertical legs. So we determine that by the width of the feet, and the width of the feet is determined by the width of the pelvis. So if you kind of remember this, and this will be in the background of the video as we go through the rest of it. But the feet are basically hip joint distance apart. And again, notice the smile on the face. Okay, so to give you a different visual of what that looks like, I love my foam roller guy. So if you were 6 feet tall, made of foam and 4 inches around, this is what you should look like. With the ears stacked over the shoulder, stacked over the hip, stacked over the knee, stacked over the ankle. But most of us are not walking around like this. We've got parts that we've kind of pushed out in front, which is oftentimes the pelvis, and maybe parts that we've pulled back behind us to counterbalance the fact that the pelvis is out in front of us. And then the head oftentimes ends up coming forward. There's sometimes a bent knee, so we don't have a straight leg. So there's a lot of ways that we've kind of habituated to changing our skeletal position to how we've moved, or injuries that we've had, or what we've been told about how we should move. And the vertical leg thing, we should have 2 vertical legs. So if we stand with the feet too close together, we don't have a vertical leg. If we stand with the feet too far apart, we don't have a vertical leg. So again, this is important for bone loading. It's also really important for the use of the musculature that's required for walking, as well as the wear and tear of the joints, especially the knees, but the hips, the ankles, the bones in the feet as well, the joints in the feet as well. Okay, so the first components of getting this alignment are foot position and stance. So foot position refers literally to the position of your foot. So here in whole body alignment world, we use very objective markers, bony points, because we know that those are going to be true 100% of the time. So we don't worry a whole lot about extra upholstery and fluff, because the bones are the bones, and they're going to be true, and those bony markers are going to be true, unless you've already had some sort of surgical alteration, or there's some sort of birth deformity. But we're going to assume that for the most part, this is all going to be true for you, and if you have any questions about you in particular, please feel free to email us and we can address those for you. But if you haven't been surgically altered and you weren't born with extra parts or missing parts, then these are going to be true. So outside edges of the feet straight, that's the first point of foot position. Well, that is the point of foot position. So we use that as our cue, outside edges of the feet straight, but I'm going to show you exactly what those bony markers look like. So we use the bone at the ankle, which is the lateral malleolus, and the bone at the base of the baby toe, which is really the head of the fifth metatarsal. So sometimes if you wiggle the foot around, you can feel that bump in there. So these 2 points and the line that's created between these 2 points should be pointed straight ahead. These 2 lines should be parallel to each other. Your feet are the levers that you push off from when you're walking, and they're just like the tires on your car. If you walked out to your car in the morning and your tires are pointed in opposite directions, you're not going to get in the car and drive away. You're going to call AAA, and they're going to take you to the alignment center, which is why you're here. Okay? So outside edges of the feet straight. The second component is stance, and that has 2 parts to it. And we want to make sure, remember our vertical leg diagram, we want to make sure that we have vertical legs. And the way we determine how far apart the feet should be to have vertical legs is by the width of the pelvis. So you're going to feel for those bumps on the front of your pelvis. Those are called your ASIS, stands for anterior superior iliac spine. And if you want to look up the meaning of all those words, it's pretty self-explanatory. You are welcome to do so. We call them the as-is bones, for like nicknames. That's how far apart your ankles should be to make sure that you have vertical legs. So you can get a really fancy plumb line, like a washer tied to a string, and you can check to see if you find that little bump on the front of the pelvis, and you put your plumb line right on that bump, your weight, or in this case, that little black thing, should hit right at the center of the ankle. And as long as you haven't shifted and done some weird thing like this, the other one is going to be the same. But sometimes you have created a habit of standing more on one leg than the other. So you do want to check both sides just to make sure that you don't have that habit. So I want to make sure that I have 2 feet that are pelvis width apart, or hip joint width apart, or ASIS width apart, so I have vertical legs. Now I can stand like this, and from this direction, I wanted to tell you one more thing. Why we use these points. So here's your pelvis. It's not really your pelvis, but this is a depiction of your pelvis. And here's the top of a femur. This is kind of the part they cut off when you have a hip replacement. So try to avoid that. Keep doing these exercises. That'll help avoid that. So your femur sits in the hip socket like so. And you can see that the long bone of the femur sits pretty much directly below this point. So it's a really good, easy to find marker to determine how far apart the feet should be so we have vertical legs. So that's why we use that. I always like to know the why, then it makes it actually make more sense. I'm more likely to do it if I know the why. So I want you to know it as well. So if you look at me from this direction, I've got my feet pelvis width apart. I have what appear to be vertical legs. But there's another component to stance to make sure that we have vertical legs, and we have to check it from the side view. So as I turn to the side, I get my feet straight again, outside edges of the feet straight, make sure those 2 points are lined up on both sides. And I have my feet pelvis width apart, but you can see from this direction that I do not have a vertical leg. If I take my fancy plumb line again and check it, and I'm really just kind of splitting myself in half from front to back, and I put that line there, you can see where that black thing hits, pretty far in front of my ankle bone. So I'm going to need to back my pelvis up until that hits right at the ankle bone. So that's a vertical leg, and that's what you want. Now I want you to notice something that happens. You're going to have to take a peek at my butt as you watch. When I back my pelvis up, can you see how my tailbone untucks a little bit? I don't know if you can tell you might be able to use the line of my orange shirt. So as my pelvis comes back, it also untucks a little bit. So we want to make sure that we have a vertical leg and hopefully a neutral pelvis sitting on top of it. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in another one of the introductory videos. Okay, so that is foot position and stance. Outside edges of the feet straight, pelvis width apart, and weight back in the heel so we have a vertical leg. Okay.